Hello, Star Wars fans. Today is going to be my breakdown and review of Acolyte Episode 6, and we got so many clues to all of the many mysteries, but in particular, the mystery of who Qimir truly is. I think we learned a lot about that. So there will be spoilers, but as long as you're okay with that, then let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget, we have a July contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check that out to see if you are interested. Okay, so the episode starts off with Osha waking up in Qimir's lair. And I must say, it's a pretty cool looking lair. For a bad guy's lair, I would hang out there any day. Very cool. And we also see that it looks like Qimir did not do force healing. In my last episode breakdown, I thought he force healed Osha, but considering that her wound still looks pretty bad, force healing is out. He does not have that power after all. And then we do see, though, that Osha is very, very far from home. She ain't in Kansas anymore. But the question is, where is she? Well, they don't really give us much, right? Unknown planet. That's the first time I've ever seen them do that, at least that I can recall, to actually put a graphic up to say we don't know where this is. So, time for us to start guessing, right? Well, one good guess is Octo, which, of course, we saw in the sequel trilogy, and we see Rey there walking around. It was a very beautiful sight, and most importantly, you see the little mountainous ridges and the ocean, so yeah, that's a pretty good guess, right? In fact, we see these little creatures who may or may not be the really creepy thing that Luke milked. Oh man, it's hard to ever get that sight out of your eyes. You can't unsee it. But anyway, is that maybe an early version of this thing? I don't know. Anyway, very good guess. That's one potential for the planet. But I really do like the guesses I've seen that it's Baldemnik, which is a planet that actually has never been, in canon. It's always been in legends. But if you look at the Cortosis there on the wall, literally the walls are bleeding it. I do think we may be seeing a canon now version of this planet. And this planet was first mentioned in Darth Plagueis' novel. And in fact, here's a close-up of the Cortosis you can see there. And there's so much about this planet that fits perfectly. So according to Wikipedia, best wiki for Star Wars out there for sure, Baldemnik was an ocean planet, that works, adorned with rocky tropical islands, that also works, and it's out in the Outer Rim territories. But even more important is this. Plagueis killed his master Tenebrous there, on this planet. Interesting. And then acquired the mining rights to a large portion of the main continent. So, if this is Baldemnik, or at least a canon version of it, does that mean that Qimir is Plagueis? I wouldn't think so. I mean, look at that head. This doesn't seem to fit, but man, they're certainly giving us a lot of hints that he might be. In fact, I've never brought this up, but if we go all the way back to episode 2, isn't it interesting when we first meet Qimir, he's sleeping. And of course, how did Plagueis die? Well, according to Sidious himself, unfortunately, Plagueis, taught his apprentice everything he knew, and his apprentice killed him in his sleep. So was that an early hint when we see Qimir sound asleep that he's Plagueis? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. It just seems unlikely, but then keep in mind, the Sith can disguise themselves. Obviously, Sidious looked like sweet old, gentleman Palpatine when really he looked pretty nasty. But that's a big difference than making your head that's giant and cone-shaped look smaller. So I don't know. I just know they're certainly hinting that Qimir might be Plagueis. So, all right. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on that. But Osha then follows Qimir, who she now spots, as he's walking off and, well, decides to take a bath. Oh my. This was an interesting part of the episode. Well, it was important that he at least took off his shirt so we could see that scar, which we will talk more about that scar later. But he didn't just take off his shirt. Nope, he takes off everything and jumps into the bath. Yikes. But there are many temptations awaiting Osha. Obviously, there's a totally naked Qimir, but also he leaves his lightsaber there quite intentionally, I suspect. So Osha picks it up, stay where you are, she says, and he says, your stance is good, but you need to keep your other elbow up higher. So already he's kind of taking the master-apprentice position with her. Interesting. But then he says, if you're not going to come join me, I'd like to put my clothes back on. And yeah, then he gets out of the pool buck naked. It's like, Qimir, put your lightsaber away, please, please. So this scene, I'll be honest, made me a little bit uncomfortable overall. Kind of reminded me of the movie Cruel Intentions, if you've ever seen it. In particular, Ryan Philippe's character, well, kind of pulls this same thing. Comes out of the shower naked and exposes himself in front of Reese Witherspoon, who is the one that he's trying to, seduce. And just the fact that I would think of a movie like Cruel Intentions while watching this episode means that they went to some wild places. So anyway, I don't mind it, I guess. It's just I didn't expect this from Star Wars. For Cruel Intentions and Star Wars don't normally come out in the same sentence. But nonetheless, he finally puts his clothes on. But I think it's interesting. If you think back to the episode where Osha and Jeki are talking, and Osha says, next time I'm on Coruscant, I'll look you up, and we'll go to a cantina and trade shows about Master Soul. It definitely seemed like Jeki was interested in Osha. It was hard to tell if Osha was just as interested in Jeki, but I will say it was interesting that Osha, if you watch her in those scenes with a naked Qimir, she's not really looking him up and down. She's not seeming to thirst over him, if you will. She's just standing there. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe that's a temptation that ain't going to work on her. But that was at least respectful, that it wasn't like totally ogling naked Qimir. But yes, finally he's got his clothes on, thank God. But anyway, so then Osha asks both about Soul and then about May and whether they're dead or not and are alive. And I thought it was interesting. Qimir says, yeah, you're talking about Soul before you ask about May. Your own sister. So he notices the relationship that she has with Soul, which then triggers her to realize, you kind of speak like you were a Jedi. You understand this Master-Padawan relationship really well. And he drops a bomb. He says. It was a really long time ago. First he says it's a long time ago, then he says it was a really long time ago. So how long are we talking? 16 years ago? Centuries ago? I don't know, but that's a big reveal that he used to be a Jedi and he has fallen. All right, so then he's doing everything he can to put Osha at ease. I mean, he basically was naked in front of her, which means he's very disarming, right? Because he's not hiding anything. He left his lightsaber out, and then now he's even saying you can swim out to the ship if you'd like. You just need to get started before sundown. So yeah, by giving her this freedom, and remember, Qimir said earlier, I want freedom. He said repeatedly, I want freedom. Well, he's giving her freedom. Isn't that interesting? To tempt her. Then he gives her a little lesson in the Force. The Jedi teach there's only one way to access the Force. But he says, below the surface of consciousness are powerful emotions. Anger, fear, loss, desire. Wisely, Osha says, that's the path to the dark side. And I love that he says, semantics. He is a master manipulator. Wow. And then the master class in manipulation continues because she says, well, you killed Jeki. You killed Jeki. You killed Yord, she even points out. But in regards to Jeki, he says, well, you would have had the same relationship with her that you have with your master. One-sided, which is a very good point, right? Because you're not allowed to have those relationships, certainly not romantic relationships, but even this deep relationship. You can't have that. And then he says, why do you love people who can only go so far? Great point. Great point. Another reason that you might want to consider the dark side. So those that predicted that Osha might go dark, I heard people predicting that even back in episode 2. Boy, were you right about that, because this is looking like she's going to head dark. So then they go outside, and Qimir gives her a big test. She's still got the lightsaber, and he says, turn it on. Turn it on. And she explains, well, a Jedi doesn't attack the unarmed. And he's like, okay, why do you still think of yourself as a Jedi? Which is interesting. We're going to get a little more depth into this question around why did Osha leave the Jedi? I think that is still an open question. And she says, when he says, that they didn't want you. And she says, that's not true. Yeah, I left. And he says, why? And she says, because I chose to. Are you sure about that, he says? So this whole question of did she choose to leave or was she thrown out? That continues to come up. Remember, way back in episode 1, she was very defensive. She said, leaving the Jedi was the hardest thing that I've ever done, but it was my decision, no one else's. Is that true? I'm beginning to wonder. I'm really beginning to wonder. Because Qimir says, this anger, this pain, this is who you are. The Jedi saw it, and that's why they threw you away. She says, they didn't throw me away. Then why aren't you a Jedi? He says. And finally she says, because I failed. I failed. Failed at what? Man, I really think there's something important still to learn about this and why she left. But we don't get the answer now as to what the failed means, because she literally throws him against a wall and turns on the saber. And then he gets transparent about his losses. He says, I lost everything, Osha. But when you lose everything, that's when you're finally free. So yeah, he is really doing a good job of making her start to get very interested in his past and how he has dealt with the loss, because she had massive loss and it's led to her anger that made her have to leave the Jedi. So now he's saying, well, you have another option. Hang with me. So then we go inside with the helmet, and he's working on fixing it. And an interesting note about the helmet, you can buy this thing, or a version of it, obviously. $100, almost 100. But notice it's already sold out. This thing was so popular that the pre-order item sold out. So I'm sure they'll have more. But if you want to dress like a Qimir for Halloween, and you have enough money, you can do so. That thing looks really, really cool. I would love one of those. Awesome. All right, so then he explains his true desire. He says, I made a mistake with May. I thought she wanted more than just revenge. I mean, here was somebody he thought, oh, I can get her the revenge that she wants. I can bring her in, and she can be my acolyte. But all she wanted was just revenge. On the other hand, he says, I thought she wanted what I want, the power of two. You know what's so interesting about the things he says is they always have multiple meanings. I mean, obviously, the power of two, we could take the obvious answer. He's referring to, he's a Sith, and he wants an apprentice, the power of two. But also, this makes us think of the witches, that infamous scene from episode 3, the power of one, the power of two. And of course, the power of Manny. Yeah, see, Manny, do you see where I'm going with this? Because the actor's name is Manny. You see? That's why I don't do stand-up. Anyway, it is really interesting, though, that they said the power of two. So he still seems so tied back to these witches, right? And in fact, someone had pointed out that while everyone is hooded, most of them you can see their faces, but some of those in the back, you can't fully see their faces. And it was Mario here said that 2 of the hooded figures in particular, during the ceremony, as soon as the Jedi appear, they disappear. And he says, I'm pretty sure he, Qimir, was one of those hooded figures. So I think it's going to be really interesting in the flashback to see if Qimir was even part of this ceremony, perhaps. Wouldn't that be wild? So, man, so much to learn in this next episode coming up. All right, so now we get this question of who is it that gave that scar to Qimir that we saw earlier? Who gave that to you, she asks. She says, it looks like someone stabbed you in the back. And he explains, it was someone who threw me away. Your Jedi master, she asks, because now she knows he was a Jedi, and he doesn't answer. Isn't that interesting? I mean, as much transparency as he has given with her, he's unwilling to answer that question. So it's up to us to try to decide, right? There's the scar as a reminder. And I have seen some really interesting theories that because it is so funky looking, like a Y, it might have been via the lightsaber whip, basically, that Vernestra is going to unleash. We'll get to her in a minute with her whip. Could it be that he was Vernestra's Padawan? Qimir? Oh, my. This just gets crazy, right? There are so many possibilities. I love the fact that this mystery has so many ways it could go, right? There's just, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Could he literally be the Padawan of Vernestra? Craziness. All right. So now he avoids the subject, does not want to talk about his former master, and instead talks about Cortosis. He explains that it's handy against lightsabers, like we saw last episode, but it also is a sensory deprivation headpiece, like we used as younglings. So what's interesting about this is not only are they giving us the lore and telling us for certain that, yep, that is how the thoughts were being blocked in the previous episodes, but he's enticing her because he used to be a youngling just like her. Which, by the way, is a good reason for me to bring up this image again. I can never stop talking about this because, yes, we now know those are sensory deprivation devices, right? Which means, why were they using these lightsabers? They could have killed each other. No, I am certain the lightsabers were just glow sticks. There's no way those were real lightsabers. But it is interesting that he's referring back to this when they were younglings and those devices they used. And I like the fact that it officially canonizes what the Star Wars website told us, which notice under the stranger's helmet, they say it's twisted metal that forms a sinister smile on the Cortosis helmet, he's now said that masks the identity of the stranger and keeps Force sensitives from peering into their thoughts. So, yep, they've explained it. It is official. Love it. All right, so then he says, with the mask on, it's just you and the Force and what you bring with you. He says, try it on. She says, I don't trust you. And he says, nor should you, but you should learn to trust yourself. Man, the dude is just a master. You know, some of the dialogue has been a little stiff in some of the other episodes. I've heard people complain about that if they have a big complaint about the series in general. But man, the dialogue in this episode was fantastic. So yeah, this was enough. She is now officially tempted. She wants to go check out that mask. She heads over and notice how she's just almost caressing it like she is hypnotized by it. That's just really cool. So sure enough, she lowers it on her head and she's breathing heavily as she looks out now we see very, very small eye holes. And as she's breathing heavily with the mask on, totally reminds you of Anakin putting on that mask for the first time in Revenge of the Sith. So yeah, now she has it on her head, and we really do learn that Qimir couldn't see. I mean, he fought those Jedis basically blind, but not blind because he used the Force. But that probably explains why his fighting tactics were so erratic, right? So yeah, very, very cool way to end this segment of the episode with Osha and Qimir. So the question is, who is Qimir, right? Is Qimir Plagueis? I could see that. I could see that. Is he tenebrous? Possible. Is he venomous? Because Venomous, if you remember, was one of the other apprentices of Tenebrous who illegally had both Venomous and Plagueis at the same time. Okay, that's possible. I love this theory from before that someone left, Khonshu 6620, suggesting Aboleth was tied in. Notice those teeth. That's a great theory. And then more and more theories are tying Qimir to the Knights of Ren. Maybe he's the first Knight of Ren. I mean, the mask is similar to Kylo Ren. The voice modulation when the mask is on, that's similar to Kylo Ren. The Force dyad stuff. Man, I mean, there are so many ways it could go. I love it. So let me know your thoughts. I really kind of like him being Plagueis, but I just don't know if that's going to work out ultimately because of the big head. So I also like Venomous. But anyway, I like every one of these theories. They're all so cool. All right, so now to May and Sol. So we have Sol calling back to Coruscant. You have clearance for transmission, and he uses emergency code 0, which this is just a small thing, but it's one more thing from Legends, in this case, one of the games, because they used emergency code 0 in that. Now, it was actually the Empire using it. It was an Imperial code, and now it's official that the Jedi use it. But that's just kind of fun. I like when they take little things sprinkled here and there from Legends and bring them into canon. And then he explains, my whole team is dead. Yikes. But while he's talking, May is walking around the ship, and I thought this is really cool because this is the first time May has been in this ship since episode 3 when she was a little kid. So she's remembering Indara saying, May, this is the test. You must divine what images appear on the testing screen. And little May is saying, what do you want me to do? So that's kind of wild. So in a way, you got Osha over there being tempted by Qimir, but now you got May being hopefully brought back to the light by Sol. We'll see. We'll see whether that works. Then you got Bazil. Good old Bazil. Very suspicious because Bazil knows that ain't Osha. That is May. The question is, does Sol know that? But we're going to get more to that. I do think Sol knows. All right, so in comes May now ready to take out Sol, and Sol is saying there's a much larger threat than we anticipated. Osha, I'm going to reset the transceiver, and please take the wheel. So I think he knew. I mean, he's not dumb. I think he knew what May was doing right then. Number one, I think he knows it's not May already, but he definitely knew that May was coming up behind him. And by convincing her to take the wheel, he's able to walk out of the room and have her be in command of the ship. Now, this acting was so good. How he just shudders. He shudders, slams his fist down, and look at his eyes, the pain. So I think there's multiple levels of pain going on here. Yes, it's the loss of Jecki, Yord, the team. It's also what he did 16 years ago, whatever the heck that is. But I think also he knows that was May. And he knew May tried to kill him. He knew that if he had let her do it, he'd be dead. And that's what I think really affected him here. So it's my opinion. I realize we don't know for sure, but let me know your thoughts. Do you think at this point he knows that's May? Anyway, I really think so, because then he goes over and hugs her and says, "You saved us, Osha." And then follows that up by saying, "That man, he corrupted your sister." But I think he's talking directly to May, and he knows it. He's saying, "You were corrupted, May. You were corrupted." Interesting. Anyway, he says, "Then it's time to make things right. It's time for me to face the High Council to tell them everything." Now, there are multiple times, this is just the first of many, where he says, "I'm going to tell them everything." In fact, he said that multiple times in previous episodes. Oh my goodness, how many times is he going to say the phrase, "I'm going to tell you everything," and then something stops it from happening? Anyway, now we head back to Coruscant, and we actually see why Vernestra is being so cautious. We learn that there's a Senator Rayancourt, who continues to gain support, and that my colleagues in the expansion region will vote in favor of an external review of the Order. Interesting. A full review of the Order. And then this is so funny, because he says the review should not cause any alarm. The Jedi are always transparent with the Senate. He didn't say it that way, but I'm stressing it, is that's what Vernestra's hearing. Oh, crap. We're going to get a review done, and they all think we're transparent, when we all know, as viewers, they are not transparent. They're hiding a massive, massive issue here with Sol, with Qimir, with May. So, yeah, I know that Vernestra is acting really sketch. I totally agree with that. But I think this is why Vernestra knows they're under review. So in comes this dude, Mog, I think his name was, and he says, "Hey, we received a distress call from Master Sol." And good old Vernestra is like, "Oh, I'm going. Believe me, I'm going. Prepare a rescue team to depart for the planet Kofar immediately." And he's like, "Well, you're joining us on this mission, Master? You get nauseous when you travel through hyperspace." And defensively, she says, "I don't get sick. I find it unsettling." Now, this seems like a throwaway line, but actually, I think this is referring to something from the High Republic novels. Sorry for covering you up there, Vernestra. But Vernestra had something called hyperspace visions. So she would literally get visions through hyperspace, in hyperspace, and that's what kind of made her get sick. So let me know your thoughts, but I think this is yet another wink and a nod at some of the earlier High Republic lore. Very cool. All right, so she says, "I need to handle this personally. I hope that's all right with you." I don't think that was a question. I think that was a statement. It better be all right with you, because, yeah, she's coming. Meanwhile, back with May and Sol, good old Bazil makes his move, but I don't know how effective that was really going to be. Bazil, that's not helping. But on the other hand, Pip gets really vicious and squirts May with oil. Yuck, that's nasty. Probably hurt, and it's probably hot. Then she says, "Well, I'm going to reset you to factory settings. How about that?" And sure enough, she does. Notice poor little Pip's eyes turn red, which reminds me of when they did that to C-3PO, right, in the sequel trilogy. And luckily, they were able to restore his memories after resetting him, because they had a backup of them. So I hope we have a backup of Pip, because boy, that would stink if poor little Pip just got wiped. But then May approaches Sol and says, "Have you told me everything that happened on Brendok?" And of course he hasn't. He says, "Well, you were very young." And she says, "But I'm not young now. You can tell me." So it's interesting that he didn't just tell her right now. I think, well, we're going to see what happens and when he does finally tell her, but I think he was a little nervous about telling her when she was standing up. Well, you'll see what I mean in a moment. Anyway, the system powers up suddenly, so that's a nice distraction, so he doesn't have to answer her question yet. But then when she goes to finish the distress call, she starts with, "My name is," she was moments from saying May, which would have been bad, and she gets hit by the blaster. You can see that coming behind her, and sure enough, it's Sol blasting her. And even Bazil's like, "Wait, what's going on? What are you doing? This makes no sense." But now notice he says, "Oh, May." So he reveals here that he knew it was May, but I think he knew a lot earlier in the episode. So then over the intercom, they say, "Master Sol, the rescue team's on the way." And he's like, "Well, that's okay, because I'm a head out." And so he books it away right when the team zaps in. So Vernestra is now coming to the planet. And I thought this was interesting. They say, "Seems an Umbramoth colony hatched last night and wreaked havoc on a local settlement. That could explain a large amount of casualties." Now, I'm sure Vernestra's thinking no one is going to buy that a bunch of moths killed a bunch of Jedi. But It does add to the carnage, the overall carnage. You know it's going to be a mess, and the Umbra Moths were maybe part of it. But yeah, there's no way they're buying that story. Instead, when they find the bodies, poor Jackie, R.I.P., and then Yord. I keep wanting to call him Cord. Why? I don't know. Anyway, Yord. Sorry, buddy. Yord. And then this is cool. So Vernestra then hears, I guess, Force whispers, maybe, where she's able to sense the things that went down. Kind of like we saw Rey do in the sequel trilogy at a couple different points. So yeah, let me know your thoughts if you think these were Force whispers, but I kind of think so. And then this Umbra Moth. Bad decision, buddy. Bad decision to attack, because that brings out the Saber Whip. Really cool. I love this thing. And this is from the novels, so it's not something he created for this series. That's Vernestra, and she's always had this thing. And boom, cuts that poor Umbra Moth in half, and then she retracts it in and says, okay, clearly they were not killed by Umbra Moths. They were killed by a lightsaber. What does that tell you? So the dude says, well, a powerful Jedi must have fallen. You don't think Master Soul was responsible, he suggests. Now, I think Vernestra's really happy she didn't have to suggest that, because she goes, oh, that's quite an accusation, when I'm sure in her mind she was thinking, we're setting Soul up. We are setting Soul up. Please. She's thinking to herself, please say Soul, please say Soul. And sure enough, he did. And then he even says, well, who else would possess the power to slay such a strong group? Oh, man. I mean, right? We're seeing this cover up. We're answering the question of how did no one know the Sith were back? So, man, poor Soul, I think he is going to take the fall. But then Vernestra, to herself, whispers, actually what's happening is something to tip the scales. That's what's happening. So she knows, but nobody else seems to know. So what do you think? Does Vernestra need to also die to keep this all a secret? We'll find out. I don't think we'll find out in episode 7. I think it'll be in episode 8. That's where it's all going to go down. So then she says we should prepare these bodies for burial. So that's good. At least they want to bury the bodies. And then it's finally time to come clean for Soul. But now, notice, this is when he decides to talk to May, when she's strapped down and tied down. So I think he knows May isn't going to like what he has to say. He says, I have no intention of harming you, May. We need to find your master. We need to save Osha. But first, you and I are going to talk. I've had 16 years to think about what I'm going to say to you if I ever got the opportunity. So that's interesting. That kind of implies he maybe knew she was alive, because remember in the earlier episodes, he thought she was dead. So I think he's just saying, if I ever had the opportunity, this is what I would say. But notice, she is completely tied down as he says, you're going to listen. So yeah, I don't think she's going to like what he's got to say. Wow. So on to episode 7, right? Which we've talked a little bit about this. What do we think episode 7 is going to be titled? Because notice how we've gone back and forth, Lost and Found, Revenge and Justice, then Destiny. The only thing that the first flashback had was one title. Then we went Day and Night, Teach and Corrupt. So what will be the title of 7? I think a lot of you have given your thoughts, so please leave in the comments what you think. I kind of like freedom, because Qimir has talked repeatedly about wanting freedom to do what he wants, freedom from the Jedi. The witches have said they want freedom. So I think Destiny versus freedom might be interesting, but let me know your thoughts on the next title. Also, man, we still have 12 questions, and none of them got answered in this episode, at least in my opinion. The only one that got even more complicated is number 1. Now we need to know Qimir's master, but the Sith master and the Jedi master. Who is his Sith master, and who was his Jedi master? Man. So yeah, we got 12 questions, but I'm going to bet, fingers crossed, most of these get answered in the next episode, with maybe a few dangling into episode number 8. Man, so excited. Let me know your thoughts. I cannot wait for episode 7. It is going to be incredible. Don't forget, July contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment, win a book or a steelbook. And then there's that membership option in case you might be interested. And of course, we have the Discord. Always like to bring it up. 1,400 members across the globe. There are always conversations going on 24/7. And here we are talking about the Acolyte. We have a special place for spoilers, so you won't get spoiled by accident. And we would love you to be part of the conversation. I will leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we will all eagerly, and I do mean eagerly, await episode 7 of The Acolyte.